Hi, welcome to part three.
This is our part three of our video series.
Where are you today?
I am in my office today. As you can tell, the environment is a little bit different. Where are you today? And where have you just gotten back from?
Well, I'm back in London. Got back from Peru this morning, and I'm
Nice.
surprised I'm still awake. But I think I have so much energy inside of me.
Well, let's talk about what we're going to get into today, which is comparing our Andean roots and being Peruvian, coming from the Sierra, having the face that we have, and the features, being in London for you, and how it's been for me being in California.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about London first, because that's the first place that I was fully conscious of being Peruvian. Of all the places I could have been adopted from, like, say, China or India or even in Africa, but really a Peruvian face, I can say that growing up in London, not really many people recognised that I had a Peruvian face at all. I grew up without really having anyone identify me as like, wow, I can tell you're Peruvian because X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I think growing up, I was identified as being of colour, so to speak. Most people didn't know where I was from, so they assumed I must have been Indian, or they assumed I must have been Filipino. Because we have a large Indian population and we have quite significant population of Filipinos. And I think lots of people thought I was in from that hemisphere.
Oh,
So
wow.
I said growing up, no one identified me as being from South America or from Peru because there's not really enough of us to provide an awareness of it all. And I also think I was really aware of my features because of the books that we'd had in our house. I would identify with the pictures of Peru, which were predominantly from the Sierran landscape. So from the pictures that I saw in my book, I saw, well, I have black hair, I have brown skin, I think I have a round face, and I recognized I had high cheekbones. And I don't know, I guess assumed that people would be small. But I'd say growing up for London, I never was really part of anything, of any group. I was just myself.
Yeah.
And even if I was to tell people where I was from, I would always get Peru, or when I was very young, obviously the children were like, where is Peru?
Right.
So Peru is in South America. Okay, where's that then? Well, you know, America, United States was underneath there somewhere. So even growing up, I had to sort of educate people where Peru was. And even when people say, so what part of Peru are you? I always found it difficult to say my city, Arequipa. So that was kind of difficult to pronounce.
Right.
But I can say that growing up in London, having this face was sort of unique. I didn't really feel any discrimination because there wasn't any sort of stereotypical discrimination like known in London. But then again, I didn't say anything of myself and other people. I think if
Right.
I was to say to myself, what group would I identify myself with, or who would I look similar to? I would say, well, I always had Filipino friends around me. I thought they were very similar in a sense. They were very calm, they were very sensitive, they were very sweet. I really got on with the Filipino
Oh,
people
wow.
in general, I would say. Growing up in London, I didn't learn anything about myself, like my features. I got it all from books or I got it watching documentaries. I could just say, well, that looks like me. And I
Right.
guess having three of us in my family being looking Peruvian, I kind of just assumed, well, we sort of all look similar in various shades or heights and stuff. So I
Yeah.
guess it's there. But I didn't really understand what it meant to have this face, really, truly, significantly, until I went to Peru when I was 19, 20. And then from then on, I kind of understood more, put everything into context, what this actually face means. I think I understand myself better now. I mean, what this face means, and I think my race. I think even though I
Right.
can't say I was brought up in a Peruvian family, I can identify with when I go to Peru. I'm seen in a different way as if I'm treated from London. So it's two distinct ways that I'm seen. The first thing I should have picked up was a long time would have been my name. I was working in a shop once, and I used to have my name on my it was in the shop where you used to have your name, you used to have all the languages you spoke. Like you had the flags and stuff. So I wrote in the shop and I had my name. My name back then was Caroline Forrester. And I remember someone saying to me, "So you're from Peru, aren't you?" Yes. I said, well then, what's up with your name? I was like, what do you mean what's up with my name? Caroline Forrester. No, I mean, but you don't have a Spanish name. I was like, oh, it's true. I don't have a Spanish name. And they were like, So, what? Kind of explain that to me.
Right.
But she didn't say, but she's like, why don't you have a Spanish name? I think you're Peruvian, aren't you? I was like, yes, I must admit, Forrester is a very, very Peruvian name. And then I said, oh, yes, because I'm adopted. But then I realized my name was so English that I never assumed that with your name, you had,
Some sort of
people
identity.
assume, yes, identity. And I guess growing up in London, I never really encountered that until I once worked in a shop when I was like 21, and I realized people must have been thinking all sorts of things when I was a child, like inscribing in all these schools and stuff. And I was like,
Right,
I
right.
must have thought many, but I didn't actually dawn on me until then. My
Yeah.
name says a lot. Even today, when I got back from Peru, I gave them my passport to go to get back to London, and I gave them my British passport, and they looked at my passport, and in it they read Milagros Forrester O'Grady, and they looked at me and they took the passport up to the ceiling to make sure it was real, not fake. Then they had to call the supervisor to make sure that this passport wasn't fake.
Oh my goodness.
And then, but this happens to me all the time now. So I was like, interesting. They always ask me, am I married? No, I'm not married. And then I'm like, I'm adopted, and then that's it. They let me through. I could tell them I was married, but then well, no, I just tell them I'm adopted. So
Yeah.
I think every time I give my passport to them, I should say I'm adopted.
Just
That is why
automatically.
yes, I think I should say that now because my name isn't really Peruvian. Yeah, I was born in Peru. And yeah,
Right.
my face says everything to them that I should have a Spanish name, that I shouldn't have a Forrester O'Grady name. And I guess this is true in wherever countries I've gone to, especially in the Americas. Not so much in Europe, because I'm a European citizen and they're used to having different faces with different passports. But generally around the world, even in India, even the Philippines, they look at me thinking, you must be Asian. Well, no, I'm not. So I think passports say a lot and they need to know where
Yeah.
you're from.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah, for me, there was a lot of Mexican families around when I was growing up. I grew up in Modesto, in California. Because there were so many Mexican families and such a large like Latino population, everyone just mostly assumed that I was Mexican and that, my family was Mexican. And then not only was I Mexican, but then that also translated into, well, you have certain values then because of the fact that you're Mexican. There's a lot of Catholic families, and I was baptized Catholic, actually per the request of my birth mother, but that was probably the first and last time I've been in a Catholic church was when I got baptized as a baby. Junior high and high school were a little bit different, and that's when things I think started getting very like separated. I started really noticing that people were, like you said, like, when they look at you, they have certain expectations and they have certain pressures in a way that maybe sometimes they do and sometimes they don't understand that they are putting pressure on you. But I know I felt pressured, and I felt that people had high expectations or just certain expectations of me because of the way I looked. Most people expected that I would speak Spanish, of course, of course, why would I not speak Spanish? And I ended up actually connecting with a really good friend. I met her in junior high, and she was Mexican American, and she didn't speak Spanish either, and she got a lot of that too. There's kind of like almost like a shaming thing, and I don't know if you ever experienced that, but it's almost like it's a shame that you don't speak Spanish if you have Spanish speaking roots, if you're from a Spanish speaking country, or your family comes from that. It's like, wow, you are just so embarrassed of yourself and your culture. Like, what a shame. Like, shame on you. That's what I remember feeling as like growing up here, was that I was wrong, like whatever my life was like kind of wrong. Again, I felt similar to you, is that most people didn't recognize that I was Peruvian. Very, very few people would be like, oh yeah, you do look Peruvian. If I said that I was Peruvian, then some people would be like, oh yeah, you do look Peruvian. So there was like some knowledge, but there was definitely, I had to tell people like, oh, this is Peru, or like, wait, so you're from Peru? So like, what does that make you? Peruvian, Perubican, or like, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff.
What about do you speak Peruvian?
Yeah, yeah. So what do they speak down there? It's Spanish. Oh, it's
Peruvian.
Spanish.
Do you speak
Do you
Peruvian?
speak
You mean
Peruvian?
Spanish?
Yeah. Well, we speak Spanish. That's the dominant language now. So I remember having a lot of experiences with language, mostly because of my looks. I remember a lot of people, restaurants we would go into, people we'd see in the streets. or at stores or whatever that would automatically just want to connect with me and like have that familiarity with me because they assumed I spoke Spanish. And when they didn't, their reactions were very varied. Some people were like, "Oh, well, like that's I just didn't realize." Some people, like I said, were like I felt like shamed by them, that I didn't speak Spanish. And then other people wanted to know why, like, well, why, what's the reason? And I'm like, well, I never grew up speaking Spanish. I was adopted. I didn't grew up with my birth culture, so that's why, it's kind of not my fault. So stop blaming me.
Yeah, it must have been really, really hard because I got the reverse. No one acknowledged me, anything, but you got the opposite. Everyone acknowledged you. And it's so different, our
Yeah.
experiences. Like, I often thought, would it be nice to have been acknowledged? But then I must admit, it wouldn't have been so nice to be acknowledged as much as you had to
And there was
acknowledge
definitely
yourself.
some moments when I felt like, oh wow, like, people are connecting with me, people are acknowledging me, or they feel like this sense of familiarity with me just because of the way that I look and the way that they think that, like I said, in their mind it goes from like she looks like this, that means she must be this, that means she has these values, which means she's the same as me, which means she's not an enemy. And so it's like they kind of go through that path and then they want to be like friends with me or talk with me or whatever. And like I did like that, it was nice, it was a good way to connect with people. But then, yeah, there's definitely a part of it that like a lot of people didn't see or didn't understand with their questions or the way they reacted to me. That like it hurt me. It hurt my feelings a lot. It really was one of the reasons that like it impulsed me to learn Spanish and then eventually to go back to travel to Peru so I could be extremely fluent in Spanish, to the point where I am now. I have a job as an interpreter and I work in Spanish speaking communities. I learned Spanish in the school system here, which is like kind of I guess you would say like a standardized Spanish, so it's kind of a weird, not really pertains to any particular culture Spanish. And then when I went to Peru, like I just got all Peruvian Spanish. And so then coming back here, when I speak, some people sometimes don't understand me because there's so many Mexican families. They're like, "What?" And I don't really understand them sometimes either. I'm like, what's that word?" There's still like a little bit of a language gap, I would say, but it's definitely different now. Now that I have the face and I have the language skills, it's like people don't really ask any questions when you have that. But before, there was a lot of questions, definitely a lot of questions. Well, I have a different background now because my laptop died, so I had to change locations again. So I'm back at my house. Milagros is still at her apartment. But we wanted to get into the second facet of this topic with, having our features, being in our adoptive countries where we grew up, where we live, and then also contrasting that with how it was when we were in our birth country of Peru. And we've both had different experiences with that. How did that come up for you? How was that an apparent or like a relevant issue over there?
Gosh, there's so many experiences I've had and so many kind of misunderstanding or miscommunications that I've experienced. It's funny because you don't realize how powerful a face is in Peru. It's so powerful and good and bad. I have such a typical Peruvian face. I kind of realized when I was growing up, but I didn't know to an extent of how much people would perceive me or how much people would just look at me. And then when I started to speak, kind of just look at me like an amazement that I actually spoke English. and I didn't speak Spanish kind of fluently.
Yeah.
I think because of the geographic kind of environment, sort of Peru is kind of divided into three topography. So you've got the coast on the low level, and then you've got the Sierra, and then you've got the jungle. And Peru is made up of 60% of jungle. And so I came from the middle section, which is the Sierra, or my parents at least, where at least my mum, she came from a small part of Puno, which is she lived from the land. She used the land and she worked in the land, and that was their main economy and the main job. Everything was to do with the land. And I think the Sierra equals land, it equals lots of connotations. My history I know now, like my first language was Quechua. So there's so much significance to the being from the Sierra.
Right.
I think if you look at Peru in general, it's like, as in all cities, like the main city is the capital city. So Lima is made up of Lima, and so even though life continues in Lima, it's a bit of a crazy city. Everyone has come from, lots of people make their way from the Sierra down to Lima.
Right.
And their experiences in the city is always dependable upon, obviously, the economy and the level of education that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real struggle if someone comes from the Sierra and they don't have access to the Spanish language or access to a good education. And so like the stereotype of being an Andean Peruvian in, say, the capital is sort of kind of like passed down from one generation to the next. And so arriving in Lima, I think it's depending upon where you visit or what you say or where you go to, a certain place or people you meet. But you won't necessarily experience it in a day-to-day kind of activity like if you're a tourist or something like that. I mean, you might get strange looks. You realise as a tourist yourself, anyway, being in Peru, like you'd be in an English-speaking group, so everyone around you would be European or American, and they would not be looking like you.
Right.
So that's kind of my first experience, being Peruvian, being a foreigner in Peru, but looking Peruvian, but being in an English-speaking Caucasian environment when I used to take tour groups, or being in a hotel where the people who used to serve me would look like me,
right,
and obviously the customers wouldn't look like me. So I kind of like in the middle of both things at the same time. Especially if we go to the provinces, the Sierra, they'd even more stare at you because it'd be like sort of trying to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
Where are you about? Sort of what are you doing? And you're by yourself and stuff like, oh, I'm by myself. And like they're trying to kind of figure out. But being in Lima is one hand a different experience for me, and then being in the provinces is a different, because I feel kind of like people are not in a bad way, but trying to kind of really, really understand me in the provinces, in the Sierra. First of all, I used to travel by myself, so being kind of independent woman, going all over around Peru, and people used to say, "Who are you with?" or "Are you not scared?" And at the time, I was like, "What do I need to be scared of?" So, it's kind of like, well, what's wrong? So I kind of like, there's a gender, and then there's a racial stereotype,
right?
And then how I was kind of independent, really independent for a Peruvian girl. And then going into places where lots of Peruvians don't have access to because either for money, I can't afford to go traveling, or even in myself being being a Peruvian English person, I don't think there's many with this face. And I think I kind of like upset the status quo of things. I kind of like unsettled everyone, so to speak. But I think that's a good thing because it kind of makes people aware that it doesn't matter, your race isn't defined by there's no stereotypical of one's race. It's just that unfortunately in Peru, access to education, access to that is very much sort of dependable on race, and historically always has been. So I can understand the situations and the mentalities and understand the problems.
Right.
In my experience, I felt it being completely different to the most Peruvians. But I mean, I was reading a book which I find really interesting called I can't remember the title of the book, but it's about global inequalities, but particularly Latin American inequalities. And they were saying that in all the worlds and all of the continents in the world, the most unequal place on the world is Latin America, because it's about access to education, access to the environment, what they can get out of their own environments. And it's true, like as I said, looking like a brown Peruvian girl, you're not really expected, or it's not really common to be seen in certain places. Now it's sort of more developing and changing, but certainly when I first went there, it was very much like sort of bounded. Like it really wasn't common. It's how people have access to all these things, and in Latin America, historically, they haven't had access to all these things.
Right.
It's always been predominantly the higher class, which have been predominantly a European heritage. When I'm in Peru, I kind of feel like I'm like pressing the boundary sort of thing, like getting everyone kind of on edge, kind of like what's this about and stuff like that. But I think it's great. And then they reflect upon why it's possible, and then they kind of reflect on the society. So kind of those are my experiences.
I think the first time that I went, you spoke about being in tour groups and stuff. I mean, I was with my mom, my adopted mom, who's white, and then my brother, who's Peruvian, my biological brother, and then his family, which is also white, and then our family friend who's also white. And so we were going on these big different tour groups, and I think I was like 12 at the time, but at the same time, I kind of don't remember being like, oh, like it's like us with the white families. I think I remember only certain moments when the waitresses would come up to me and speak in Spanish to me, or things like that. And I was kind of used to that just from being at home anyhow. And maybe it was my age too that I was kind of like, it wasn't really ingrained in me yet. Like I said, when I really got into like high school, it's when I started to see like really apparent differences and like racial divides and, you know, class divides and a lot of prejudice and discrimination and race and straight out racism, you know, was much more present in high school. So anyhow, maybe I just wasn't like seeing it at that age. But I remember that first trip that I took, it was a 2 week trip with my family, and it was like so blissful, you know, like it was just like beautiful women on tours, and it was so fun, and I loved it, and didn't want to leave. And then the second time I came, which was when I went to go live for 1 year, and I was going to school at university, become more fluent, look for my birth family, and just be in the culture. That's when I got like a really rude awakening, because I was the first time that I had really experienced, I think, like direct and overt racism. Because growing up in California, there was little things here and there, you know, kind of more like covert racism, things that you don't really, they're not just like in your face putting it out there, but you know, the little subtle prejudices that come up. So I was living in this international house when I first moved there for like the first month that I was there. It was a bunch of people from all over the world. They're from Spain, they're from Germany, they're from the United States, they're from South Africa, just everywhere. So one night we all went out to this club, which was in Miraflores, which is the notoriously like touristy district, and it's one of the nicer districts, you could say. Definitely not like the richest by any means, but it's definitely like seen as a very safe and touristy place. And there's like a really nice mall down there called Larcomar, and it's just like an open air mall that's on the coastline, which I know you've been there. It has beautiful stores, it has like a beautiful cinema, and then downstairs there's like a few clubs. So one of them was called Aura. Someone figured out we should go. So we all went out, got all dressed up, and it was me, and I had made friends with these two girls, one from the US, one from Germany. The girl from the US also had German roots, German heritage. So they were both super blonde, super blue eyes, just like typical looking, you know, typical looking white girls, you know, like foreigners, typical looking Ringa girls. And so anyways, we went out, and we took one of the girls that we had met at university with us as we were going up to get asked into the club. I was like, well, like, how are we getting in? And she's like, just speak English. And I'm just not going to say anything so that they don't know that I speak Spanish. Maybe they'll think like I'm American or foreign. And that way we can make sure that we get into the club. Because apparently it was going to be a problem that we wanted to get into the club, not being of super really rich like Peruvian limeños. And so I was like, wow, okay, I guess we're going to do this. And so she went in and was just trying to speak English with like the guard and stuff, and we all got in. There was really no problem. And then there's this photographer running around taking pictures of everyone drinking, whatever, dancing, and so I was like, oh, come take a picture of us. And like he just kept ignoring me, and then he'd like pose my two friends together and like take pictures of them. And then I remember he got like a big group of people together, and then I went in it, and like, he stopped taking pictures as soon as I got into the group. There was like this big kind of like upper area. I'm a very adventurous person, so I got up there and I started dancing. And I was immediately surrounded by like two security guards, and they were like, you need to get down right now. Like, get down off that. Like, you're not supposed to be on there. My friends saw me up there dancing. They were having a good time, so of course they wanted to jump up. So I had just jumped down. They jumped up, and like, security just happened to disappear. They had nothing to say to them. They were not asked once to get off. And like I know these are really like little kind of things, but it was just like this whole experience that I was just like, I get it. I know why I'm not being allowed to be in these pictures. I know why it would be a problem for me to get in this club. And I know why I'm not allowed to like just enjoy this nightclub like a regular person, draw attention to myself. I'm not allowed to do that. And that's because I look the way that I look. I remember going home that night and I was just like crying because I was just like, I'm in my home country. It was like one of the first weeks that I was in Peru. So it was like an extremely shocking experience for me. I think I felt betrayed by the country. Like, I came back and it was supposed to be a wonderful thing. And I remember my trip when I was 12 and it was wonderful. Everyone accepted me then, and like now it's different. I'm being judged. Throughout those first few months in the country, I had a lot of like identity crisis maybe. I was just really trying to figure out like, well, maybe I'm not Peruvian, and like whatever, I'll just be American as possible. You know, I was like 19. I had to kind of go through that and figure out like, where do I meet in between these two worlds? You know, and like also seeing that like I could think of myself as one way and think that I had a certain identity, but there's always going to be other people that want to put an identity on you. But they want to give you your identity as well. And so then you have to also grapple with that and grapple with navigating other people's expectations and perceptions and, beliefs that sometimes they don't want to change about you. I remember another time I took my little brother down there to the mall just to have him go see. I wanted him to go see the view of the beach, and like they usually have security guards walking around, but they never like do anything. But as soon as we approached, they like asked us for our IDs to go into the mall, which that never happens. And my brother, he has also really strong features, strong bone structure, small eyes. He's darker. He dresses differently. My family, my birth family is from the Sierra as well, from the Ancash department. And again, like there's no other explanation for it. Like I said, no one else gets carded. I was at that mall before too, and I never even got carded. But as soon as this guard saw my brother, he asked us for IDs. There was these two girls I was friends with, and one of them had curly hair, one of them had straight hair, and they're like, "Oh yeah, even we get treated differently just because of our hair." I have straight hair, so people give me more opportunities, and she has curly hair, so people just assume she's just like from the provinces and she's wild or whatever, so they wouldn't treat her the same way. I took classes about anthropology and race, culture, and society, ethnicity, and history and Peruvian social reality. I took different types of those classes when I was at university, and so then I actually got to kind of like academically study it and understand it from a different level as well. Look at the history, like you said, a lot of it's ingrained in history of the country. Just kind of like the U.S. too. There's a lot of stuff that goes on here. It's ingrained in the history of the country, and I think in a way it did help me. And I think also those experiences actually kind of pushed me to the path like where I am now, to study different social justice issues and to learn about cultures and to learn about language, and just because it plays such a huge role in our lives. I think sometimes maybe people don't realize how big of a role that these issues play, but they play an enormous role. And so it was really, really intriguing for me to be able to then break it down academically and do some research and take on some projects so that I could kind of, I don't know, just deal with this stuff that I was experiencing. It was personal. It was really personal. And I just had to figure out some way to deal with it. So that's kind of the way I started to deal with it. Just learning, getting myself as educated as possible, and arming myself with information and learning about other people that had similar experiences to me, so I didn't feel so like, oh, I'm the only one that sees this.
I think it's interesting because I know lots of, like, whenever I see like European people or American kind of Caucasian people in Peru, they all seem to be doing really, really well. Like they always get access to things that we could never get access automatically. And I've kind of thought about it in my last trip. I don't know what made me think about it, but it seems as though like if you're like if you kind of got that look that Peru like, which is usually what European looking, like Caucasian looking, you can do really, really well in Peru.
Right.
And yet because we don't really look like that. We don't have access to certain things because we kind of just they don't. Well, I don't know. I just don't feel that we have harder access to that. The kind of we have harder access to get to know all levels of society. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Right.
Whereas Europeans I feel they can just walk in and they can just have access to everything. I kind of realised in all my trips and stuff like that, I feel like you have to work really hard. You have to just go up to them and say. You have to actually just knock on the doors and stuff for people. I mean, if you want to do work experience in certain things, because you've got to kind of like put yourself out there a lot more, as opposed to if just a person came from Europe and just wanted to work there. I feel like they kind of just accept them automatically. They don't even have to do a background check. I think that's just Peru, and hopefully one day things will change.
Yeah, slowly more and more people are becoming more aware of the environment and what they're doing is affecting their natural resources in the country, and just like class and race issues and things like that. It seems like and like some things are kind of changing. At least I saw it at my campus, at my college campus, that people were starting to become aware of those issues and were interested in working on them, to better them. But at the same time, it was interesting being on my college campus too. That was a whole nother playing field, because it was, like I said, it was a private university. There's a lot of international students. They're known for going to that school. There's a lot of Peruvians that like latched on to the international students, just because they're international, which of course happens in the U.S. as well. And people want to kind of like characterize these people that they don't know anything about. I feel really thankful that I found some amazing, amazing friends at university. They were just wonderful people, and they were not shallow, or they were not stuck up or had so much privilege that they weren't able to kind of see past it to the reality of things and stuff. But there was definitely people at the university that I think felt really entitled in society and felt really comfortable putting other people down. So yeah, we had kind of a more serious conversation today, ended a little bit more on a serious note. But these are really important issues, and there are definitely things. I mean, I'll speak for myself that they really affected me when I went to travel from my birth country. And like I said, it shaped my academic path. I think it shaped me as a person to be able to have had the experience to travel to my birth country and compare it with growing up in the United States. It was huge. It was huge for me. I learned so much. I learned a lot. So these are really, really important subjects. I just want to say that. And anyhow, so next week we're going to kind of expand a little bit more on this topic, but go a little bit more into less of the kind of racial and societal norms, and go talk a little bit about how it's connected to living in a developing country and traveling to and originally being born in a culture that is seen as third world, developing, however you want to call it, underdeveloped. There's all these different names that people call countries outside of, I guess you would say the economic powerhouses. These countries outside of places like the United States, where I was from, and Europe, where Milagros is from. And so we're going to talk a little about how we saw those differences, what our experiences were, and how we deal with being a part of both of them. So, until next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.